Good morning, everybody. I'm going to just do a little update, sort of like I did last week. It's Saturday, November 14th. I'm still going to post a video where, you probably are going to see it first, maybe not, but I'm going to title it Tower 7. I'm going to just talk about some things. About the World Trade Center bombing and just things like that. And the purpose is not really to get into conspiracies at all, but it's to just, I'm really dealing with some of the things that we're reading in the Gospels where Jesus was confronted by people that had questions, but they were not sincere. And they were simply asking him questions with ulterior motives. We know you're a teacher, come from God, you do all these things, you don't respect man, and what do you think? And his response immediately is, you bunch of hypocrites. And it says he perceived that they weren't about honesty, truth. It became, there are agendas that people have. And so today my conservative friends should like this video. But I'm not a conservative, nor am I liberal. But because I'm going to just talk about a few issues. You know, the other night I was watching NBC News. And I haven't really watched the main news, ABC, NBC, CBS. I used to watch the regular World News Tonight, those things. But the last month I've caught some of it because of my Roku TV. They started doing almost a live thing I could catch instead of just clips of the other news. And it was, I don't support anybody for this election. But the world news was Ben Carson, Dr. Carson, who's kind of equaling Donald Trump, right now in some of the polls. And it's how he supported some dentist friend he had that was guilty of embezzlement or something. And that in one of the books or something, Carson, he said, well, he's a friend of mine, and I support this man. And then they went back to one of Ben Carson's books that he wrote, and they went to the page, this is world news, and they went to the page of a book where he said, but I want strict laws on people that violate, certain laws. And then they went back. It was basically a political hit piece that had nothing, should have never been on the world news. Paris, last I saw, is 120-something people killed yesterday. But when you see world news things like that, and granted that story was the day before but when you see so-called media, and I just watched it was like a 2-minute thing, 3-minute clip, and it had nothing to do with news. It had nothing to do with. There are so many scandals that if you went back, and people forget that there are so many scandals that you could have looked at with the Clintons, Hillary Clinton and all. Even the Whitewater thing, when you went all the way back, and they were looking, people forget because there's so many. And when they were looking for papers relating to the Whitewater, which was the Arkansas deals that the Clintons were involved in, and then one day, in the national media, they reported this, but there was no investigation, no questioning, and they were looking for Whitewater documents. And are you hiding them? Hillary was not running for president, but Bill Clinton was president at the time. Are you hiding these Whitewater documents? And those documents showed up. And how did they show up, John? Where did they find those documents? In some dumpster somewhere? And they showed up on Hillary Clinton's dining room table. The maid found them one day. Well, of course, that meant they were hiding the documents. So did the media question? Mrs. Clinton, how in the world did these documents that you guys claimed that you didn't know whether your maid found them one morning? No, there was no questioning. It was, they're there. Proof. prove that we put them there. Little things like that, normally, that one thing alone, and I could give you so many, that's normally it. You're out, we're seeking instruction. Benghazi. What's the shame about Benghazi, John? Are you conservative? No. I'm telling you, the sad thing about Benghazi was Ambassador Stevens, who was our first ambassador, murdered in many, many, many years before, and it was in Benghazi, Libya, a few years ago, when Ambassador Stevens was murdered and the embassy was run over by those militants in Libya. Initially, most of you are familiar with it. So, the media story that was put out was it really didn't have a lot. It wasn't really a sort of a planned attack that these radicals were mounting, because if that story was the main one that made it to the media, it would look bad it was Obama's campaign for the second time around. And so most people that look at it realize that Hillary Clinton, who's the head of the State Department at the time, didn't want people to kind of see that Libya was not going good and that militants were succeeding, because they were using Libya as an example. I remember Fareed Zakaria was talking about he was a big supporter of the president, who was a news guy on CNN. He said how Obama, Libya is the new way we're going to do things. Libya is an absolute disaster now. So most people think Hillary Clinton and others really didn't want to make it look like they were doing bad there. Now here's the very sad thing. Later on, we found out, and they just did the hearings last week. Hillary finally appeared. They said, oh, she did such a great job, and it was so wonderful. What's wonderful? Ambassador Stevens actually made various requests, and there were even tweets or texts or emails that came out where they were joking about, man, if they don't do something quick to give us some more protection here at the embassy, we're all going to be dead. Jokes like that. But Ambassador Stevens made legitimate requests to the State Department, run by Hillary Clinton, saying things to the effect of, we're all going to get murdered if you do not help us. And they were denied. Ambassador Stevens was denied any more help or protection, and some feel he was denied not because of a money issue. You could have sent some troops over there to protect that embassy. They believe he was denied simply for a political reason, because if more protection went to that embassy at that time, it would have said, oh, why are you sending more protection? Maybe Libya isn't going as well as you're making it look in your campaign. Okay, that's what was behind that. And so all of that, the truth on the ground truth is, that ambassador they wanted a tremendous concern that they were going to be murdered. And they were murdered. And they were murdered. Now, normally, if you have any other person that's in the head of the State Department, and you have an ambassador requesting, and under your State Department, whether you made that decision personally or not, and you denied that Stevens and the embassy people over there protection, and it came out that they were basically begging for it, you'd be done. You'd be gone. You'd be out of the State Department, which didn't happen. But you would never be running for president of the United States with that scandal. And what's sad is the media, just how they reported Hillary Clinton finally appearing before that congressional committee, which is head up by Trey Gowdy. The media reported she did such a wonderful job. And it's scandalous that man, Stevens, did request and made it known. And a lot of embassy or ambassadors, a lot of them never make requests like that. So brazen. or you don't see, like, geez, we might wind up getting killed here. There was communication from Stevens and his team when they were there in Benghazi at our embassy in Libya, where they were kind of joking about, you know, man, they're scoping out, and it wasn't a joke, but they were saying, look, there's people here scoping out this compound. These militants are ready to hit us. You don't have normal conversations like that in our other embassies. So there was so much, red flags that the State Department should have immediately done something big there. And they denied them. That's a scandal to me. And when the media reported how wonderful Miss Clinton did, it's a scandal to me. Because it's not about how well you presented yourself. It's about what did happen. But yet the media found time to go back and to look at something. When I saw that one thing about Ben Carson, I don't have any dog in this fight. I'm telling you, I don't. What is my view of Mr. Carson? He probably inflated some of his testimony. Maybe. He seems like a good Christian man to me. I don't see him as that you'd go back and you could have investigated so many things with so many of these other people. There's so many incidents. And so that's, to me, those are all manipulations. And a lot of my conservative friends, they're like, they see that. And many of my liberal friends that support Hillary, it's just a matter of like, oh, they're after her. They've been after her for all these years. All of the cases with the women that Bill Clinton went after, and they portrayed those women. They used the term, James Carville himself, who was defending all the women that Clinton went after and had things with, and some he groped, one claims he raped her. These women were drugged through the media by Clinton and Carville and their team and called them trailer tramps, bimbos. These women went after, and Hillary Clinton herself was behind some of those things because they didn't want Bill Clinton's career to be affected. But it was obvious he was with them. Yeah. And people knew. And some of them, it was consensual, but in a few groping cases and things, Kathleen Wiley and all, these are not, these are women that were upset, and they were portrayed in ways that, so this whole history, and then we're here at this time, and more than likely she'll be the nominee for the Democratic. The FBI just increased the investigation, just extended it 2 days ago. That the holding on the emails, now they extended it because it's obvious that the Clintons, Hillary and her group, were not totally forthright about the server and all that. And so now it opened up just 3 days ago, it opened up to another statute where they might have violated law where you were not completely upfront with. So, and this is the person, these are the people that we put up for, we can't find better people than that. This is Matthew 23. I might just read a little. The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, observe and do. But do not do after their works. For they say and do not, for they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders. But they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers, but all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, and enlarge the borders of their garments. If I remember, I'll tell you what phylacteries are. And love the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Be not ye called Rabbi, or teacher. For one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Neither be you called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. But woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, nor suffer those that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore you shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you can pass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. Woe unto you, you blind guides, which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. You fools! You hypocrites! You're blind, you're stupid. Listen to his language. For whither is greater, the gold of the temple, or that which sanctifies the gold? Whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gift, he is guilty. You fools and blind! For whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. You blind guides which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. You see these, you make such a mountain out of something stupid. A little incident, not just political. And then there's huge things going on, and you're not seeing it. It's a big story that Mitt Romney, let's make it the New York Times headlines. Mitt Romney bullied some kid back in high school or something and gave him a haircut, and that makes it to the front page of the stupidity. And yet, people are being murdered, killed, slaughtered around the world. But we're straining at gnats. And this is not just political. I'm just giving you examples here. I'm just showing you how there are real issues going on in the world. And so yesterday, after all the silly media stuff, they had the gall. I was on CNN online, reading the news last night right here, just catching up. Yesterday, ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but more than likely ISIS, they had one of the most successful days. And if you think back to the Russian plane, where 224 people were killed as that plane was taken off out of Egypt, ISIS took down that plane. So they killed about maybe close to 400 people in a few days. So when you're looking at the amount of people that they have killed and targeted, you could say they've had one of the most successful weeks from their point of view of taking out people, because there were four last I saw, I didn't check the news this morning, 120 people were killed yesterday in Paris in 4 separate incidents. At the soccer thing, at the restaurant, it was a coordinated attack. And it wasn't just one single bomb, it was shootings, hostages. France closed its borders yesterday. They're under a terror alert, national terror alert. It was organized, strategized. ISIS hit Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah themselves were deemed a terroristic group, but Hezbollah is backing Assad in Syria. Therefore, ISIS targets Hezbollah because Hezbollah targets them. And so they hit Hezbollah yesterday too. So they had one of the most organized attacks because it was hitting in different countries at the same time. Many dead. And on CNN, one of the top stories was by a military analyst who I like to, he's knowledgeable. His name is Peter Berggren. Berggren. And his article was, is it not the beginning of the end, but is it the end of the beginning? He was basically saying that it looks like we killed Jihadi John, one of the guys that was the ISIS guys that was killing people on video. And so it looks like we got him. And so Peter Berggren's top story there on CNN, it was top one when I got on the online thing, was how we are making such headway against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and that somehow, we're doing so well the gall to put that article up there on the very day, within hours of the most successful attack and the most civilians killed by ISIS in a few days, and you put an article like that. And Bergen's a fairly good guy. He probably started working on it the day before, and they had to get it up. They weren't going to waste that time. And I was going to leave a comment and say, the goal, how could you run an article how it's the end of the beginning of ISIS and all on a day when there's most effective targeted attacks, shut the whole country of France down, they're in a panic, the world media is, and you're putting something like that. And I was going to leave a comment, but you have to sign into CNN and leave a comment. But there was some other guy, he's got some like dragon icon for his face, and he might be a radical, but he was leaving comments. And he was saying things like, what idiots, how could you even report how we're winning on a day when they have, it would be like reporting what success we have against Japan on the 1 hour after they hit Pearl Harbor. It would be like reporting what success we're having against terrorism. It's the most successful year we've had, like reporting that 1 hour after the 9/11. It's the stupidity, the ignorance. And when you're looking at Jesus talking to these Pharisees, he's telling them, you're blind. You're blind. You don't see the writing on the wall. You're not concerned with, this is not a political thing I'm doing here. There's some good things in this chapter. I'll read a few more verses. The point I'm making out of this chapter. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, and the outside will be clean also. He rebukes them. I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth till you say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. He rebukes them. He tells his disciples. He gives them instructions. He says, I'm starting this movement. This movement, guys. I'm the Messiah. I'm the Christ. He says, and as you see my example, Jesus says, of truth, of honesty, you're going to see injustices. You're going to see me crucified. And he says, and I want to instill in you some things. He says, I want you to understand that this is not about you. You're going to call no man your master in this group. You're not going to rise to, this is not about what the Pharisees are doing, John. Guys, this is not about, they're seeing their involvement in religious things as promotion for self. That they're going to accomplish these goals, they're going to attain these things, they're going to be recognized as leaders, the fastest growing church, all these types of things. And that's what motivated those guys. And then he tells his men, don't be motivated by that. Don't let that motivate you. But you're going to, even if it means you will live a life of anonymity, where you will not be even recognized in this life. But if you're carrying out the work of the kingdom, you get a reward from my Father in heaven. And Jesus teaches principles. He says, as a matter of fact, the things that others don't know that you do, the good alms deeds that others don't know about, then you get a reward from God. And you don't tell it. Can you really, would you be able to raise somebody that really died and never tell it? Could you do it? Because then you're going to get a better reward. Could you really lay hands on somebody and they really get healed and you never tell anybody about it? Could you really go give your life for that little kid and help that person or die for somebody? But not be concerned that others know, because you know that you have a reward before your Father. He was instilling that in them. And he says, when this movement grows, he says, he's telling them, you're all brothers. And in Christ himself, I'm the master, I'm the leader, I'm the head of this church, I'm the head of this thing. And this thing of ministry and of church and of everything that you're going to someday want to be involved, it's not about you. It's not about a platform that you will be on. It's not about how many people will know. It's not about people giving money into something that you deem as local church and somehow all this money is going to come in. And no, it's not that at all. Paul's going around to these churches later, these cities, He's making deposits in those people. He's depositing in those people. And then he's leaving those communities and saying, continue with Jesus. Continue focusing on him. And the elders that he would ordain in those cities, which you read about, were simply leadership that they were not the main focus of those communities. Jesus was the focus of those communities. And they were just there to help them, to facilitate their understanding of walking with God and knowing Jesus. And so he instills in the same chapter where he's rebuking, that he says, the Pharisees have all this involvement. What were the phylacteries? They were little, there's an Old Testament scripture that says, the word is to be upon your head and upon your hand. And those Pharisees did just like we do today about the book of Revelation, when it talks about the number and Christians are interpreting computer chips in your head and all this. And so they made the same mistake, not seeing the spiritual meaning behind. The Old Testament said that the word was to be on the frontlets of on their forehead and on their hand. So they had actual little boxes, packages, like maybe a wallet. And they'd have scriptures in those so they could fulfill the scripture that it's supposed to, the verse that says, have the word on your forehead. Well, of course, over time, I guess the little bags became like, huge packets on their head. And they're walking around with those things, looking like idiots. Because they're thinking, look how many verses I have on I'm carrying a lot. And everyone around saw the stupidity of it. A lot of people watch, a lot of the majority of the public, when they see TV evangelists, especially when they see they see it almost as a clown show. The majority of the public see it that way. And the people that are on the stage performing, even if maybe they have good hearts, they don't realize that they're making such a sham out of it. They don't see that. They see it as a performance. They see it as the more extreme ones. Not all of them, but some. And so Jesus was telling these Pharisees, you're missing the whole thing. You're not even seeing none of it. And he told the disciples, he said, I like that one verse. I'll end on that verse. It's almost 30 minutes. He says, what is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Because they had a little debate. It was one of their foolish things that they were doing. They said you could swear by this, but you can't swear by this. But I like, what is greater, the gift or that which sanctifies the gift? If you have a gift to teach, to preach, to event, if you have a gift, it's not the gift that's greater or what it's about. It's the altar that sanctifies the gift. It's God, by his mercy, has decided to give you a forum, whatever that forum might be. And so the only reason your gift might even be considered by others, wow, you're such a good preacher, teacher, it's simply not the gift. It's because God said, okay, I'm going to allow you to have a forum to communicate my truth. And Paul would tell the Corinthians, it says, don't exalt different personalities of people. He says, who are they? They're just ministers by whom you believe. So Jesus says, what's greater is, the gift is not greater, but the altar that sanctifies it. And God has said to some of you, I have a friend that says, John, I'm not real good at public speaking, and I'm not real good at reading. But he tries to help people, connect them. And I said, look, Scripture tells us that that's the public speaking thing. The more gifts that you see, Paul says in Corinthians, that are the more fleshy ones, they're not considered. It's the ones that are considered less prominent that really have more grace upon those gifts of service, So he's instilling that. And if God, and you preachers and pastors and ministers, if God's given you a forum, it's not about your gift. God has placed you for another purpose. And you have to, and if people become enamored with your personality, and they say that we're enamored, which is a natural danger in the gifts, that people become enamored with you, with your gift, then it's your responsibility to lay that aspect down. That you avoid that. You say, this hinders what God's calling. And we don't see that way. Today I did a little bit on the politics, only because it upsets me when I see there are real things going on. Those attacks, I don't make light of those attacks in Paris yesterday, and I don't know, last night 120 people were killed. We are looking at, there was just one or two little stories in the beginning of the year. Remember Greek debt crisis and all? There's so many more, and you say, oh, did we ever fix any of those? None of them have been fixed. None of them have been fixed. And just one of those could have been enough for there to be a global crisis, politically and economically. Just one of them could have been enough. You've had so many since then that we're not even talking about them. You've had little incidents that would have made national headlines. The one little ballistic rocket that Iran shot last week in a violation of a long-standing treaty that they didn't violate for a long time. North Korea does these rocket things, but Iran did not do it. And they just did it 2 weeks ago, 7-8 days ago. In the past, that alone would have been world news. That one thing, regardless of how you view our relationship with the whole Iranian thing, but they actually are doing it and going to get away with it with no repercussions or nothing because there's so much going on. So what I'm trying to tell people when they look at, oh, I guess we're riding out the storm. We're not riding out the storm. There's nothing, at the end of this year, as we come to the end of this year, there is a global crisis that's coming. And we've not dealt with those things. None of us have dealt with those things. They're not being dealt with. And even in the political arena right now, the various things that people are proposing, it's not going to make a difference. And I'm sorry that in the kingdom we look for a city that has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. But none of those things are going to make here that these things are going to be shaken. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken. But the things that cannot be shaken will remain. I'll end with a different verse I put up. Let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishment upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written. This honor have all his saints. Praise ye the Lord.